Good afternoon to all the students present for this session, and we are going to discuss the Unit 6 of MMPH 002 HRD. We have understood the basic concept of HRD as the process of developing competencies, commitments, and a culture. So today, in detail, we are going to understand what this competency means to us, and whenever we do talk of the concept of developing competencies, how do we identify the gaps that the people do have in terms of the required competencies, and how to bridge that gap, what we should do to bridge that gap. That is what that we're going to discuss for today's session. So just to start with the basic concept of competencies, what you say that the dictionary meaning says the quality of being competent or a state of being competent. Now, even to talk of this term competency, it refers to anything, any sort of traits, motives, values, attitudes, skill, knowledge, abilities, whatever it may be, that we have imbibed within us from our childhood days. When we are exposed to the process of socialization, we are exposed to the process, like we are exposed to the family, to the society, to our schools. We have started gaining knowledge from all those different aspects that are associated with our life, and whatever that knowledge we have gained is called as the competencies. So it may be reflected in terms of certain traits that we possess, which may be because of the personalities that we do have, or because of the changes in the personalities that we do have, maybe certain motives, values, whatever it may be. So here we refer to the competencies which are required by the organization for having that competitive advantage. The competencies which are required to achieve its visionary state of existence. The competencies which are required to make the organization sustaining on a long run. So we need to understand the concept of competencies from the perspectives of the organization. Therefore, we can think of the definitions as given by some of the authors, like Unit in 2002. It's a set of skill related knowledge attributes that allow the individuals to successfully perform a task or any kind of activity within a specific function or job itself. So more or less, whenever we do talk of these competencies, it is confined to skill, knowledge, and attributes of the people. I want my employees to be efficient and effective at their place of work. Whatever tasks are given to them, whatever the duties and responsibilities assigned to them, they should perform their tasks, duties, and responsibilities in an efficient and effective way. That is the core objective of these competencies for an organization. It says generic knowledge, motive, traits, social roles, right, or the skills that a person linked to superior performances itself. So the concept moves around the accomplishment of or development of certain traits, skills, knowledge, abilities, attributes, which will enable us to perform our duties and responsibilities. And competencies are the definition of skills and behavior that the organization expects their staff to practice. Okay? So it is all about bridging the gap. Maybe as a part of the expectations, what the organizations do have from the employees and what actually is being present with the employees. The gap should not be there. So as a requirement of the organization, the individual employees must contribute what is required to them, what is required for the accomplishment of the organization's goals. That is what we need to talk of, right? So Mansfield say competent people are those who follow rules and procedures without any question. Means they adopt whatever is being given to them, whatever is being allotted to them, they carry out all those duties and responsibilities. So it is more or less to take more responsibilities and adaptabilities in the organization. Why we do talk of these competencies as one of the most important aspects of the HRD element is that we have understood earlier that the priority is given to develop the people in the role, to develop the role of the people for their present and any future role. So our objective is not only to look into the competencies required for the people to deliver their present role in the organization, but our objective is to help the individual employees to develop those competencies which will be in use in the future days to come. So whenever the employees will be exposed to those kind of future job roles, future job profiles, so their competencies would help them to carry out those functions in an effective way. Besides, unless and until I do develop the competencies of the people, considering higher level positions that they are going to occupy, can I have a successful career planning process or a succession planning process where I know that the person is going to take up some responsible positions in future. So if I don't develop those competencies within the people, so can I expect the person to work or perform effectively in those positions? So whenever I do talk of any present role or future role, whenever I'm talking of the present hierarchy or the hierarchy the employee is going to move in future days, essential thing is how do I develop those competencies? Right? So it's all about taking responsible positions in the organization. It's all about adapting ourselves to all those challenges being imposed on the organization. Bloom says the underlying characteristics required to perform a given task, activity, or role. Competency has the following terms like knowledge, skill, and attitude. So more or less, the concept moves around the same aspects that we need to develop the skill, knowledge, abilities, attitudes, or behavioral dimensions as a part of the competency requirement of the organization. However, a broader aspect of the term competency is understood as like related to knowledge, attributes, skill, training is that. But competences are that aspects which do play a very important role in one's job performance. So if people do not have the requisite skill, knowledge, and abilities, even if they are motivated enough, still they cannot deliver the desired output. So people need to develop their skills, people need to develop their knowledge ability, right? So that is why competencies do play a very important role for a person's job. Competencies do correlate the performances of the individual with the job itself. What is required and what the person does have. If those two things do not match with one another, then there may be a problem. That's the second. Third thing, it is measured against the well-established standards. So whenever we do evaluate a particular person in terms of his performances, in terms of his contribution towards the organization, we always assume that the person does have the required competencies to carry out his duties and responsibilities. But if that is not there with the individual, then there may be a problem. So if the individuals with right competencies comply with the standards of the organization, then we treat them as the golden color employees. But for any such reason, if there is non-conformity, if there is a problem of non-performance, then we do take that as a problem of competency within the individual. So, what we need to do? By any means, the focus should be on providing requisite training and developmental aspect. Let the individual employee be exposed to all those training and developmental aspects so that he can develop his required competencies. Right? So here we need to understand whenever we are referring to these competencies itself, we need to understand that these competences are broadly categorized in two ways. One is called as a threshold competency. The second one is a differentiating competency. Now, threshold competences are more generic in nature. What we assume to be present with each and every individual employee within the organization. So like we to talk of the basic knowledge aspects, basic skills, basic motivational levels, basic self-image, right? Basic roles. All those, aspects of the job which are common for all the employees, they are called as the threshold competencies. These are the minimum level of competencies that the employees do need to carry at the place of work. Without that, perhaps they will not be able to produce the minimum requirements of the organization. But we need to understand one thing, that whenever we are talking of these threshold competencies, they do not distinguish in terms of performances because they are not related with the performances themselves. Those are the basic requirement of the job without which a person will not be able to perform the job. So, no question of superior performance or lower performance or average performance comes over with these threshold competencies, minimum level of competencies that you need to understand. But when I do talk of differentiating these competencies, right? These are the competencies which actually distinguishes a superior performer to an average performer to a below average performer. So whenever we do talk of these sort of competencies, what we can think of that? It is now like threshold competencies are bare minimum necessities, but differentiating competencies are required because the individual employee would like to differentiate himself with others having those set of competencies. Leadership ability. You know that these leaders do have the ability to bring transformations in the organization, right? So whether this leadership ability is there with the individual employee or not, that is what you need to take into consideration, right? We are talking of the entrepreneurial abilities of the individuals, the risk-taking abilities of the individuals, the decision-making abilities of the individuals, the interpersonal abilities of the individuals, and the achievement orientation of the individuals. These are some of the things which actually distinguishes a person from others. So, whenever I do talk of an excellent performance, I do talk of a very good performance, I would search for both of these two categories of competencies within the individuals. There has to be threshold competencies as well as differentiating competencies. There has to be a sort of knowledge, skills, abilities, attributes which are the minimum requirement of the organization. At the same time, the individuals who possess with the competencies related to leadership, team building, interpersonal relationship, value orientation, achievement orientation, all of those things. However, if we to talk of this classification in detail, you can see the classifications are into three such categories. One is a technical or functional level of competencies. If I to talk of this technical or functional level of competencies, we can think of the individual employee's ability to deal with the requirement of the organization at large, right? To deal with the requirements of the organization at large. That's what we need to understand. Like, to what extent you are aware of your surroundings, your business practices, right? To what extent you are aware of, all those external factors, still political, economical, social, technological, environment, and legal. All those external factors making an impact on the organization. Are you aware of the changes happening in the labor market? Are you aware of the changes happening in the economies around the globe? All those aspects are required as a part of the competency related to business awareness. Organizational awarenesses. Second type of competencies that people do expect to develop within themselves is that this is a process by which we ensure how the organizations to operate, operational, we to talk of, right? So, what are the basic policies, plans, rules, regulations that guide the organization to function together, right? What are the different verticals? What are the existing human resources? What are the existing technological resources? What sort of production processes are going on? What is the production schedule of the organization, right? So whenever you make an analysis of all of those things and you develop some sort of competencies to deal with all of these problems, we call it as a organizational awareness. Technical skills we have understood is the way by which we can exhibit our skills to perform that particular job, whatever the job may be. And external awarenesses. These are something that the individual employees should develop. But beyond that, individual employees should also focus on developing their competencies in the role of a manager, right? So basically, whenever we do talk of this managers or managerial role in the organizations, is that all the managers should drive for customer satisfaction. So there is a thrust of customer oriented, thrust related to these customers, right? What is it? It's all about satisfying the requirements, needs of the customers, right? And you need to come out with all sorts of strategies to deal with all kind of needs. That's what we need to talk of. Managers need to exhibit planning skill, forecasting skills, right? May it be based on qualitative aspects or quantitative aspects. Right? Qualitative aspects like Delphi techniques, nominal group techniques, future scenario building, some of the qualitative aspects that helps the proper planning process. Whenever we talk of quantitative aspects, maybe you can think of based on your past data or based on the data available with you. You can think of making an application of statistical methods. You can think of simulation methods. You can think of making an application of regression models to carry out this planning process in an effective and efficient way. right? Cross-functional perspectives, cross-functional in a sense that each and every department, as we have understood in some of our previous classes, right? Each and every department is linked with one another. They are interlinked with one another. So, how does the organization operates taking all those departments together? Or as a senior leader, right? I do have the responsibility of taking all those verticals. So, how can I do it? The cross-functional perspectives are also to be developed. Nowadays, there's a holistic growth of the individual employees. Like yesterday only we were talking of different generations, and we have understood, we come out with a suggestion that we need to create the teams of mixed generations. Okay? And reverse mentoring program should be there. Reverse mentoring says, hey, you need to, or these older people in the organization need to learn from the newer persons, right? So that is what we need to have in a cross-functional perspective, right? Concern for judgments, leaderships, delegation, risk taking, all of these are the bare managerial qualities, that the managers need to consider for the right implementation, right? Competencies related to human attributes focuses on communication, teamwork, interpersonal effectiveness, integrity, and transparency. Okay? So, human attributes, like we said that we are social animals, we cannot live without a society. So, irrespective of my individual contributions, I need to contribute towards societal development. Okay? And if I understand that if the society grows, then as an individual, I also grow with the society. That's what we need, right? And all of those human attributes focuses on development of those social skills, communications, teamwork, everything we talk of, right? So this is how, when we talk of the competencies, certain competencies are required at organizational level, competencies are required at job level or task level, competencies are required at individual level, human level, right? So the behavior of the people or behavioral competencies of the people are to be taken into consideration, right? So that is how we do come out with a basic understanding of competencies at the place of work. We have understood the term competency, right? Now let us move toward the term competency mapping. Whenever we talk of this competency mapping, first of all, why there is a requirement of competency mapping? With the challenges being imposed on the job, with the complications rising out of the job, right? With the uncertainties being associated with the job, right? It is very difficult for us to perform in any position or in any job unless and until we are competent enough, right? So, what are the key competencies required to perform that particular job, right? And taking that key competencies, required key competencies, and making an application of all those through the different HR application procedures, right? We will be able to carry out all those verticals of HR in a systematic way, right? Say, identifying these competencies first. What we need to do? We do define jobs on the basis of that. We do define recruitment. We do talk of training and development. We do talk of appraisals. We do talk of performance planning. We do talk of HR planning. Everything. That is why there in 2006 he has identified that competency mapping is a process of identifying key competencies for an organization and the jobs and functions within. So the process is you are going to evaluate the job and the organization. Then you do come out with the basic administration of the different tools to develop these competencies within the individuals. Right? So more or less, this competency gap is about understanding the differentiation, what is required and what is there. Right? Process and individual uses to identify and describe the competencies are most critical, because you know that this knowledge, skill, attitude, behavior are more or less to accommodate the employee with the growth and development of the organization, to help the individual employees to settle down at the time of complexities, right? To help the individual employees to overcome any kind of stress, maybe arising out of employment, all those things, right? So what are the things which are required for the organization? What are the things which are available with the employees of the organization? How do they map those two things and find out the gap? Right? So that is why you need to understand that this competency mapping are one of the most significant aspects of this HRD, human resource development process. So what are the significance? Why do we think of this competency mapping to be there by the organization? It provides us a subjective knowledge of skill, behavior and capabilities necessary for the current and the future job role. We have understood that. Assisting in workforce development to bridge the gap, right? Whatever gap it is there between the requirements of the job to the competencies present within that particular individual employee, that gap has to be bridged, right? Can assess the appropriate training program, understand the gap between actual and projected developments. Most importantly, developing a proper learning path and career planning phase. So we from the day one itself, we emphasize on self-renewal mechanism, right? Self-learning mechanism. What the requirement? Whenever we are witnessed with any such kind of change that is required for the organization to adopt, may it be internal, may it be external, whatever it may be. But can that change be possible, or can the transformation be possible without the requisite contribution of human resources? Not possible. So whenever we talk of this learning path of the employees in the organization, that should be a continuous one. It's not that you should learn from your past mistakes. One of the days when we used to learn from the past mistakes and we used to take a decision of our own. But nowadays, we need to learn on a continuous basis, which will not only help you to make improvements in your career through that proper career management process, but also it is going to help you out in the proper implementation of HRD and OD in the organizations. We are talking of employees' self-development initiatives to be taken into consideration, right? Now, here we need to understand the basic models of competencies or developing these competencies within the individual employees. There are 3 such models we are going to discuss. First such model is a proficiency model. What it says, how a particular competency and a role holder must have by which he will be able to produce superior results. So what sort of competencies that the individual employee should have? It is classified under 5 such broad categories. One is beginning, elementary, intermediate, advanced, and expert. What is beginning? They say employee's response is reactive only. Means this is the first level of the competencies exhibited by the individual employee, right? And when I do talk of beginning, I mean it's all freshers, right? So for them, carrying out certain assignments or work in a proactive way is not feasible, not possible, right? So what is required? As a beginner, I need to learn from the senior people, right? That is why we say that the employee's response is reactive. What the senior manager will say, we will do that. Whatever instructions I'll give, I'll do that only. Right? I don't have that authority, or I don't have that autonomy to carry out a task by myself. We need to talk of that. Right? Elementary, within his own zone of influence and control of an employee, respond satisfactorily and is aware of his requirement. So what it says? Here the people to carry out in the elementary phase, right? People to carry out their own zone of influence means they would like to prove themselves, right? So they do, learn, and they would like to prove themselves with the basic requirements or satisfaction of basic requirements in the organization itself. Intermediate, where we say that employees to make or put extra efforts so that they can exceed beyond the required expectations itself, right? So understanding performance related problems and understanding the goals of the organization, what sort of motivation, what sort of enthusiasm should be developed within that particular person so that the goals of the individuals and the goals of the organization can be achieved is a thrust of that. Intermediate. Advanced, employees are proactive, so they exhibit leadership, they exhibit decision making ability, they exhibit initiations from their own side. So that is what we need to understand. And expert is a person who can really foresight the things, and they can create that motivating learning environment where you can deliver your desired level of performances, right? So proficiency model says as people to grow up in their organizational hierarchy, they gather certain skill, knowledge, and abilities within themselves, and those skill, knowledge, and abilities do reflect in terms of their competency at different levels. So beginners, lower level of competencies, elementary, intermediate, advanced, and expert. The highest level of competence is what is being expected from the individual employee at the place of work itself. We say this competency is also expressed in terms of this iceberg model. Iceberg model, what it says? More than 90% of the iceberg is actually hidden. What is reflected at the top is that constitute only 7% of the things, right? Visible part is 7%. Invisible part is around 90 to 93% on top of that. Whenever I'm talking of the competencies related to the technical expertise, that constitute only that 7% which is visible to us. Right? So, technical expertise, technical level of competencies are represented at the top of the iceberg itself, right? But what remains inside is the behavioral competencies, where we talk of each and every aspect of the individual, right? That the individual has either developed or gained from his childhood days as a part of his behavioral dimensions, say his personalities, right? His perceptions, his cognitions, sensations, attitude, learning ability, all of those are the behavioral dimensions of the people, right? So what is required? Skill, right? Knowledge, self-image, and motive. Okay. The most important behavioral dimension, behavioral competency is this motive competencies. If I would like to contribute something towards the organization, I will say that the motive of mine should be clear for that. Right? So what I want to do, what way I'm going to contribute towards the organization, that motive has to be clear. That motive has to be significantly defined. Isn't that motive is one of such important dimensions of the personality which dominates the behavior of the people. What is required over here is to understand the right motive of the people. And whenever we talk of understanding the motive of the people in terms of the competencies, we need to take one thing into account, that these motives can be manipulated also. Motives can be manipulated also, right? So with the different aspects, we need to bring that level of motivation among the employees, right? What will contribute towards that consistent level of performance, right? So competency mapping says with the enhancement of skill, knowledge, self-image, and motive, people can accomplish their goals, right? Now, here you need to understand this is one of the most important recent models of competency. What we say is that holistic competency model. This model emphasizes the manager's knowledge capacity, application skills, and social maturity. Given by a formula, HQ is holistic quotient, right? Is a function of social quotient, applications quotient, and knowledge quotient. Whenever we talk of this, social maturity quotient, then we'll see this is comprising of many such different sub notions, like whether the character and will quality will be same throughout the process. Right? Perception and creative quality. Do I have the right kind of evaluation of the people in my organization? Do I really foster the creativity of those employees? Right? Right? Perception is all about undermining, ignoring all such kind of possible hazards. Right? The objective is to avoid any kind of prejudgments. Right? So, imbibing those prejudgments in our decision-making process will end up in a wrong decision. Right? So, whenever we to talk of these social skills, you need to understand one thing, that you need to evaluate the other people in the society as like the human beings. Right? So when you have the right kind of understanding of the behavior of the people itself, right? Understanding of the day-to-day attributes of the individual employees, right? So that will make you more conceptual clarity, right? And the talk of this can be taken as a product of SQ1, SQ2, similarly temperamental and emotional qualities. Whatever qualities you do see is required to manage your social skills at the place of work, with the subordinates, with the colleagues, etc. All of those things will come under this social magic. Application skills. How do you make the best possible application of your skills? Like ability to communicate. Right? Here, all of us, we understand the basic aspects of communication, but why does it happen that some of us really, grow with the level of communication that we do have, and some of us do not grow with the communication, right? So it is not important that what you are communicating, it is important that how you are communicating. Understanding the basic process of communication, ability to motivate, ability for teamwork, ability to lead the team and meetings, right? Self and time management. These are the aspects of the organization which actually develops the application skill of the individuals, right? So whether the individual through possess those application skills, so AQ can be a product of AQ1, AQ2, like that only, right? Knowledge ability to talk of. It is the basic knowledge, clarity in your functions, like the objective of the management, knowledge about the future role of the management, knowledge about the basic aspects of the management, and knowledge about the system of management. So whenever we talk of this knowledge ability, here we need to take all of those functions together. HQ should be a function of social maturity, application skills, and knowledge. Okay? So holistic competence requires all of these three things present within the individuals. Okay? Hope you are clear by this time. Okay? Beyond that, we need to talk of certain other aspects of this competency mapping process where we need to understand the methods of competency mapping. Some of the methods, like your past performance based approach, where most of this gap analysis is done on the basis of behavioral event interview or critical incident interview or thematic appreciation tests, so that we will be able to understand what is required, what is there, what is the gap, and how do I bridge the gap. All of those aspects we need to take into consideration, right? So, what are the steps that you are going to follow over here? First, you need to identify the positions for whom, positions for which you are going to map these competencies. Okay? So here you need to understand one thing, that position is different from that of the designation. Like why I'm telling, position is the place in the organizational hierarchy. So some or other, if you do identify these positions, we will be able to identify many other aspects related to the job, like the reporting relationships, the process of centralization, decentralization, unity of command, chain of command, the process of delegation of authority. Everything is based on the position. So if I need to take, or I need to carry out this competency mapping process for certain positions, let me identify those positions, because jobs are numerous in the organization, right? So when the jobs do have assigned people and people do carry out that particular job, we call that as a position. It is defined in the organizational hierarchy, right? Then after identifying the position, next step is to identify the performance, right? Who are the people who are best performers? Who are the people who are average performers? Who are the people who are below performers? Can I classify all of them? Then I need to conduct this behavioral event interview, right? So after conducting this behavioral event interview, I may come out with a change which is required within the individuals to cope with the organization, and that is what is called as the gap. Okay? So the competencies which are needed to carry out the jobs and are based on the past performances of the individuals are to be taken into consideration. Second method is called as job focused method, right? Where here we are considering only the task, role, and job profile as the central point. Right? So here what is required is you need to understand the basic purpose of the job, right? Ask the incumbents to list down their jobs, measure activities and accountabilities, map each accountability or the measure task, right? So purpose defined, jobs, measure, activities and accountabilities are defined, the task is defined, right? So all of those things are to be taken into consideration, right? So method, this job focused method more or less focuses on the competencies which are based on technical aspects, right? So these are not the competencies which are related to the behavioral issues. Job methods, job focused methods focuses only on the competencies required to perform the job. That's what is the demerit of this particular method. So here we come out with value-based method, another one method to understand the competencies, right? So what is the difference between the previous one and this one, job-focused method and value-focused method? This job-focused method, where it focuses on the skill requirements of the individuals to perform the job. These value methods, they do represent the behavioral competencies, normative conditions like cultural adaptability or cultural competencies, traditional values, right? So this ranges from that careful and structured dialogue process involving top leadership to the simple pronouncement made by the CEO or the HR. Right? That means whenever I do talk of these value-based competencies, so these value-based competencies are the competencies which are defined at the top and is implemented at the bottom. So gradually moves from generation to generations and we carry out the same for this particular, right? So what we have understood is this competency mapping requires a holistic approach. Not only that, you need to evaluate the individuals. You need to evaluate the individuals in terms of the competencies required for the job, but you need to talk of the competencies based on individual growth and development and a combination of that. That is what we need to take into consideration, right? So understanding this gap is as important as managing that. Whenever we talk of these competencies, right? Our basic objective is to map and to bridge the gap, right? So how do we do that? Here is a simple model that has been given, right? Now you should begin with the workforce competencies, understanding the details of the competencies required for that particular job, right? Competencies required for that particular task, competencies required for that particular duty and responsibilities, right? But whenever I do talk of or evaluate my employees, okay, do I find out that the workforce does have requisite competencies? So here you need to define them in the form of the terms, context for performance, the learners or learner itself, right? So what are the terms by which this workforce competencies can be developed to these instructional competencies? Instructional competencies later on are developed to have these abilities: plan, develop, deliver, evaluate. These are the functions what the individuals need to do. So they need to carry out certain assessments of ability, plan, develop, deliver. Okay? So whenever this assessment of individuals are there in line with the workforce competencies, here you will find out the individual competencies will lead to individual performances. Right? So individuals to provide this credential to the consistency in their professional practice. Right? and establish those individual standards. Ultimately, that helps the organization to improve the capacity of the workforce. Similarly, when I do talk of making an evaluation of the competences of the workforce, competences of the workforce can be directly related to the organizational performance. Right? So, competences among the workforce can actually help the individual organization to develop or reach certain requirements of the skill, knowledge, abilities at organizational level. So these are the things that you can have. So individual level of performances will lead to organizational level of performances. Okay. And the next step is the mechanism for assessing this organizational performance level and its standards. Right? So both these dimensions are to be taken together as we discussed, right? Competences are the things which you can develop for individuals based on the individual's requirement, which is more or less confined to the behavioral competences, right? The motives, the attributes, attitudes, the learning abilities, the way people used to have right kind of perception, right kind of decision making, right kind of judgmental abilities. All of those are individual related competences, behavioral competences that you need to take into consideration. Okay? But when you have to talk of these jobs, it is the individuals who should confine themselves with certain competencies related to the tasks, fundamental tasks, duties, responsibilities, right? Developing certain technical abilities, developing certain operational abilities, ensuring that they do have people skills to manage and deal with workforces. These are the task and job related competencies what is required. What is required at the top is the leadership level of competencies, team building competencies, decision making competencies. So more or less, the competencies with higher conceptual values. Okay. So if we do focus on all of those three things together, individual level of competencies, job level of competencies, and organizational level of competencies, will be able to manage those competencies in a detail. Right? So let us conclude this session with some basic steps that we need to take for developing a competency model for the organization. Right? So what you need to understand is to profile the organization. You need to go for a detailed analysis, study of the organization first, then the different roles or jobs that for which you are going to have this mapping process, that should be understood. Identification of performance indicators. These are the things what we'll discuss it tomorrow, like how to carry out this performance management system, how do we take this career planning process. We'll discuss more. So superior perspective of performances, compilation of all those things, and defining the competency and validating the model. These are the common steps that we need to take into consideration for competency mapping process, right? So thank you very much, and have a good day. Once again, we'll meet on Monday to discuss the next unit on performance management system. So thank you very much, and have a good day.